Time is running out. If you're ready to take your practice to the next level, listen up because this opportunity ends Thursday. Whether you're a solo practitioner looking to fill your caseload, starting a group practice, or scaling an established one, we have a community for you. Next Level Practice, your fast track to a thriving solo practice. Group Practice Launch, your roadmap to successfully building and growing your team. Group Practice Boss, your guide to scaling, increasing profits, and streamlining operations. But you have to act now. These communities are only open until Thursday, and spots are filling fast. Don't let this chance slip away. Visit practiceofthepractice.com/level up and secure your spot before it's too late. Once Thursday hits, the doors close and this opportunity is gone. The clock is ticking. Join us now and start leveling up your practice today. Practiceofthepractice.com/level up. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Samak, session number 1081. I'm Joe Samak, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. You know, we cover a lot of things business here. We want you to have a thriving practice you absolutely love, but we also want to cover some of the clinical side. There's cutting edge research happening. There's new models. There's ways to think about things. So when we have, different clinical experts on, it's always nice to kind of talk through different things that, maybe back in grad school when you went through it 5, 10, 20 plus years ago, I'm sure a few things have changed. So one of the things that we try to do is to also bring clinical experts onto this show to just talk about different kind of switches and how people are thinking about things and what the research is pointing at. And that's why I'm really excited that as part of this Level Up series, this week, is Level Up Week. And we've been doing 16 live webinars that people have been attending. People are joining our communities like crazy to be able to get support in their solo practice and their group practice. This is our Level Up series that we're doing this week and next week. So if you haven't checked out what's already been covered, on Monday, we kicked off the Busy Brain Cure with USA Today best-selling author Romy Mushtaq. And also right after that on Tuesday, we had Body Image and Your Kids with Charlotte Markey. And then yesterday we had Amy Morin, who talked about how to become mentally strong. And her TEDx talk got 24 million views. So we have a ton of just heavy hitters during this week and next week as part of our Level Up series. And this all goes along with Level Up Week that we've been doing. If you didn't sign up for those, feel free to sign up still. And we'll be releasing some of those recordings of all those trainings. But even more importantly, I want you to level up. This is the time that we open up our communities of Next Level Practice, which is for solo practice owners. We have Group Practice Launch if you're starting a group practice, and Group Practice Boss. So if you aren't in those communities, you are missing out on so much great content, training, live help, and community. I would absolutely love to have you in there. So head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/level up to read all about those three communities. We would love to have you in there. Well, today, along that line of clinical experts, we have Jan Winha, who is an MSW, an author, educator, and seasoned trauma and addiction psychotherapist. She's an educational partner and course developer with the Polyvagal Institute, where she teaches courses and training based on her book, Treating Trauma and Addiction with the Felt Sense Polyvagal Model. Jan is an adjunct lecturer at the University of Toronto and a certifying coordinator and the International Focusing Institute. Jan is co-director with the Borden Street Clinic, where she supervises grad students. Jan teaches and lectures internationally on her Felt Sense Polyvagal Model. Jan, welcome to the Practice podcast.
Thank you so much, Joe, for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Now, has trauma and addiction, has that been part of your career throughout? I know, like for myself, very early on in grad school, I was just interested in at-risk teens. Like I loved working with them. That was my main clinical focus for most of my career before I sold my practice in 2019. So that went back to the beginning for me. Has trauma and addiction, has that gone back from the beginning, or did that sprout up somewhere kind of in the middle of your career?
No, absolutely. Like you, I started off working with young women actually who were incest survivors.
Mm.
And it was through that experience, and particularly with a lot of the behaviors that they were engaging in, what we would call self-harming behaviors, that really intrigued me. I became very curious about how to understand cutting the body, engaging in really unsafe sexual activity, these kinds of things that hurt us. But at the same time, as I really listened to these young women, on some level, it helped them. And so that's really the beginning of 40 years, over 40 years now, of
Mm.
trying to figure this out. And so I have to say that I think over time, with the particularly with the advance of what we know about trauma now, and polyvagal theory, meeting Steve Porges and working closely with him, we have better ideas to figure that out now. What's going on there? But it's a big shift in paradigms.
Yeah, yeah. I would love to, a lot of people here maybe haven't thought of polyvagal theory other than, an article here, an article there. They might have kept up with a continuing ed course here and there.
Yeah.
And some people, it might just be outdated information from grad school 20 years ago. Um, what would you, I guess let's start with updating people's knowledge on polyvagal theory. Like, what has shifted and changed in regards to what the research points to and what we know?
Well, polyvagal theory, it can be very complicated and scary. But in a simple way, it's about our autonomic nervous system. And that's the part of the body that monitors how safe we feel in our bodies. So that's, we all know that place in the body of flight fight, where we maybe hear a sudden noise and we jump. So it's autonomic. We don't think about it. It just happens unconsciously. And isn't that cool that there's this system in our body that without our awareness, like temperature in a way, it just takes care of us by shifting us into these different states in order to help us to survive. So we've known about through the autonomic nervous system the flight fight state, that sympathetic branch of the nervous system. But polyvagal theory really speaks about Steve Porges' real discovery that this branch of the vagus nerve, which is this long cranial nerve that goes from the brainstem way down into the center of the body. And that's how the body monitors how safe we are, checks out what's happening in the organs, and then feeds that information up into the brainstem. And what Steve really observed was that there's actually another branch to this autonomic nervous system, which he called the dorsal vagal branch. And that's the place where the body shuts down. So traditionally, we would think of the nervous system as the place where it's rest and digest, where we feel safe and comfortable, hopefully like you and I feel right now in our bodies, and we're
Hmm.
having fun and it's interesting. And then if something scary happened or threatening, we'd shift up into flight fight, heart rate would rise. But what Steve Porges has added with polyvagal theory is this other branch of the vagus that all of us kind of knew as trauma therapists, where people dissociate and they shut down in order to conserve energy and survive. And it's kind of like living in the basement of your house. So you're alive, but you're numb, right? You know that.
Mm. Yeah. So then how is that informing treatment now? Or I guess let me start with, is there more research we need to dig into to bring people kind of up to speed in regards to, like, obviously there's tons of research. We couldn't go through all of it, but any other kind of big picture research that you think is important for people to know before we dig into kind of your model?
Well, I think, there's lots of research available now around heart rate variability. So we're looking at, what happens in terms of the body's capacity to respond to threat, and really understanding that when we lose that variability in our response and we get stuck, that we're in this dissociated, numb state. This is very important to understand, and there's lots of research you can find on the Polyvagal Institute about this, which really backs up this understanding of the dorsal branch of the vagus. Because when we're working with clients who are in this state of dissociation and numbing, which of course happens a lot with addiction. Our clients are, their bodies are like asleep in a sense, right? We've shut down in order to stay safe and to survive. So what it tells us as therapists is that we need to be working with the body. We can't just stick with cognition because the prefrontal cortex goes offline when we're in these states of flight, fight, and definitely with dissociation and shutting down. So this is really crucial, and it's one of the messages that I'm really trying to convey to people when I'm speaking, and we all are at the Polyvagal Institute. Very important as therapists, and not just trauma and addiction therapists, but for all therapists to really appreciate the bottom up perspective of the work that we do. And that brings us into the other training that I've done for decades, which is around felt sense and focusing. And this is Jean Gendlin's work. So these are ways of being able to tap into the body and to connect with this interoceptive process of working with deeper knowings and kind of like gut feelings we would talk about, right? So helping our clients to find their way into body sensation and what we call body wisdom. So this is where we really now, through introception, through research in this area, of appreciating that our bodies know a lot more than we give them credit for. You know, we live in such a top down Western culture that really idealizes thinking. And thinking's great. I mean, I love thinking and concepts. I wrote a book. I wrote two coming out next March. So I love that. But what we've forgotten that we live in our bodies, and our bodies take precedence when it comes to survival. So if we're shut down, we're not available for cognitive therapy.
Yeah. Something always comes up when you're running a private practice. Well, Gusto's payroll and HR services can make it a little easier. Gusto was designed for you, the small business owner. They take the pain out of running a business, automatically calculating paychecks, filing payroll taxes, setting up open enrollment. Gusto does it all. Want more? Time tracking, health insurance, 401k, onboarding, commuter benefits, offer letters, access to HR experts. You get the idea. With Gusto, you can focus on the joy of running your business. It's super easy to set up and get started. And if you're moving from another provider, Gusto can transfer all the data for you. It's no surprise 99% of businesses said the value they get for Gusto is worth the price. And here's the best part. Because you're a listener, you get 3 months totally free. All you have to do is go to gusto.com/Joe. Again, that's gusto.com/Joe. I'm telling you, you're going to love Gusto. Get started today. I would love for you to walk us through what's the felt sense polyvagal model? How does it work? And of course, people probably need some deeper training in it to fully implement it. But would love to just start with kind of like an overview of what it is, and especially things that any therapist listening can start to implement that you would say like this is really helpful for people. So tell us about like what it is, what does it shift, what's it look like, all that.
Yeah. So what I did is I created a graphic model, and this is all available on my website for free. You can download it at janwinhall.com. Bodies like color and shape and design lights up the right hemisphere of the brain, right? So we're trying to tap into the body to reach people in through that vagus nerve to help people to begin to establish safety in the body, because healing can't happen without safety. So we're working with two natural processes in the body in the felt sense polyvagal model. One we call neuroception, and this is Steve Porges' word that he made up that describes that process, that natural process in the body of noticing how safe we feel. And the other process is called introception, and we work that with that through, if people are familiar with mindfulness practice, meditation practice, Focusing is a little bit different than that because we come into there's 6 steps in teaching focusing. And the first one is like a meditative, a mindfulness place where we teach people how to begin to manage their attention. So that means you have to begin to start to allow yourself in your body to feel safe enough to pause.
Mm. So is that something in a session that, as say a therapist is talking with their client and they're helping the client just notice their body more, that they should be pausing more often to do body check-ins? Or like, what would you recommend in a session when you're digging into tougher things?
Absolutely. Now, the thing is, therapists will be often anxious or afraid to do that because what happens with trauma is if people are too afraid to be in the body, right? Then we have to go very slowly and start with something on the outside, like pausing and noticing something around in the room. So we're working with neuroception in terms of establishing safety, and we're working with interoception in that we're connecting with lived experience in the body. So this isn't something you can just do in the next session with your clients because you could end up doing a lot of damage, right? You don't want to take people into contact with the body when they don't feel safe because they could get really triggered, really activated. So it's gentle, it's a process, and it takes time, but it's not like it doesn't take forever. And so a lot of it has to do with us as therapists. And I did frontline trauma work, and some of your people are doing that for many decades. And this process of connecting in with self as a therapist and then helping our clients to slow down and connect in with their own bodies it really creates resilience for us as therapists as well as helping our clients because we find ways to pause and begin to connect in with the nervous system and notice, like right now, Joe, you might ask your body, what's happening for you in your body right now? You notice your heart rate. How safe do you feel in your body? And so we slowly encourage people as therapists in my trainings that I do. All therapists first kind of learn the model themselves, right? So, how comfortable do you feel in your body as a therapist? Can you ground in your body? Can you feel your feet on the floor? Because you can't take, especially a traumatized person, into their body until you know your own,
Mm.
right? It's too scary. And that's important to notice, and that's okay, right? Once you kind of get into that practice, so in my trainings at Polyvagal Institute, everybody has a focusing partner. And people learn the model of connecting in with their own process and then connecting in with neuroception. So we talk about rewiring or helping clients with neuroregulation. And this means we're helping clients connect with how safe they feel in the body. And say they're up in flight fight a lot, then we're working with practicing always at the beginning, establishing safety. And so practicing ways of helping people to begin to feel a sense of safety in the body. And that might be something like just, imagining, using your imagination. Where's a time where you felt comfortable? Doesn't have to be perfect, but just where you felt comfortable. And then allowing that feeling of being okay, even if it's just for a little moment, noticing where do you feel that in your body? And that's the beginning. That's the anchor. Because once you've got that, then you can start to, over time, help people access what feels scary and then come back to what feels safe. It becomes like a dance of titrating back and forth. And slowly, what you're doing there is integrating traumatic experiences. We don't go looking for them, but they're there in people. They come through triggers and depression and anxiety. So we gently work with people in finding ways to come back to that grounded place that for some survivors they've never known in their bodies. So you can see this takes time.
Hmm. So what happens after that? So once the client starts to be in their body more, and seeing that dissociation that's happening, um, what happens next in the model?
Well, we start to then work through the kind of second phase. I love these. Judith Herman, wonderful book she wrote many years ago called Trauma and Recovery. She talked about these three phases of healing. So the first one is establishing safety, like we've just kind of talked about here. The second one she called remembering and mourning. And the third one, reconnection. So, one of the things we like to really emphasize in polyvagal therapy is to work in groups. Because when we work in groups, nervous systems co regulate with each other. And we can help people to create this sense of safety and connection in the group once we have established some good boundaries. That is really just so powerful. That experience where people come together and perhaps they're dealing with really difficult things and you're together in it. But in this way, you're creating these safe containers to be able to go into places that are haunting you or you don't understand about your life and beginning to understand that, oh, so what's happening for me in this trauma response is my body is caught in what I call a trauma feedback loop. So you're shifting between flight fight states in the sympathetic nervous system and then shutting down states of in the dorsal vagus of numbing and dissociating. And there isn't enough of what we call the ventral branch of this vagus nerve, which is above the diaphragm and up into the face. This is where it's activated in the body. And this is the state of safety and growth and resilience. And so when that isn't available to the body, it gets locked in this loop of flight, fight, freeze, shut down. So what we're doing is we're teaching people about that loop and we're teaching people how to shift out of it through the body, through grounding in safety, grounding in the group together, grounding with the therapist, and then also through learning in the 6 steps of focusing practice, working with the felt sense, how to titrate to come into safety and then to go into the place that's scary and kind of stay at the edge of it. And it's amazing how bodies know how to do this, how to hold both places at the same time. And that's a practice, right? All of these things we're talking about, they're practices. And more people are beginning, I think, to talk about somatic practices, that this isn't something that you do overnight. And it's not something that you do in a new way all the time. It's always new and fresh when it's in the body, but it may be the same practice that you do over and over again. And each time you go into that place that feels scary, you bring with you the support of the grounded sense in your body. Say it's a place and you feel it in your chest, for example, a place of where you hold a memory of maybe a nice time you had with your grandmother, or it could be connecting with nature. It could be being cradled by the arms of a tree in the backyard when you were a kid. Bodies will go there. The body remembers these things. It takes you to these places. If you slow down and you're quiet, and so much of what we've learned in talk therapy is about concepts and teaching and remembering and applying and in addiction treatment it's often about restraining and controlling, and we don't work we work like that in some ways, of course, because all of understanding what's going on cognitively is important, but it doesn't work if the body isn't there with you. It doesn't sustain your time.
Yeah, Jan, what are some maybe long-term habits that either clients or therapists employ to kind of keep this going, to stay in the body, to not dissociate? Like, Like, what does that look like long term in regards to habits that people that really want to do this work are employing?
Well, it's really those two basic practices that you have that you do with yourself every day. So you can, and after a while, it just becomes the way that you live. So checking in with your body, where am I right now in my nervous system? And I use a graphic model with people to help them to figure that out, which is fun to use. It's kind of pretty, it's colorful. People stick it on their fridge, they download it on their phone, and they go, okay, where am I? I'm mapping where I am right now. And what do I need to do to help myself to get back to a more grounded place? And we use to really make this concrete, because that's important too, right? We use what we call a 4-circle harm reduction practice. And we help people to map out what it is that the behaviors that they're trying to minimize. So a lot of the time when we're in that trauma feedback loop, we're into addictive behaviors, which is what the young women in my group were doing. To try to manage overwhelming feelings, the body would take us then from flight fight to, say, drinking a bottle of wine and shutting down into dissociation. So in this 4-circle harm reduction practice, people will track um, what they need to do to move away from those behaviors and out into what we call ventral practices. So these are practices that are designed to activate safety in that ventral branch of the vagus nerve. And so they are things like hanging out with friends, socializing. That's the opposite. Connecting and socializing is the opposite of what the body wants to do in a dissociated state. So remembering to do that, remembering to phone up your focusing partner and say, do you have time to listen? I need to go through these steps of focusing in my body to ask into this place that's uncomfortable. And I need you to listen, to hold a space with me. So people do these things in partnerships. And it can be things like keeping a journal, checking in every day with your 4 circles and checking to see, where am I? How am I doing? I've agreed with myself and maybe my focusing partner, maybe my therapist, that I'm going to limit myself to 2 drinks a day, or I'm not going to watch porn, or because that's a big one, or I'm going to only be on my phone for 2 hours a day, or things that we're learning, we're trying to manage, because all of those activities take us away from being present in the body.
Mm. Well, the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that without paying attention to bottom up processes to the body, we're really missing the link that is just crucial in terms of healing. Um, we can't just go from the prefrontal cortex. We have to bring the wisdom of the body into the work that we do, and also into our own life, because that's what will also protect us and make the work that we do fresh and alive and still exciting after 40 years of doing trauma and addiction work.
Mm. So awesome. If people want to connect with you, if they want to see that visual graphic, if they want to look into your training, where should we send them?
JanWinha.com. And also, I have a whole training facilitator program through the Polyvagal Institute, through their courses. We're actually starting up again September 25th. So it's a 6-month training that continues on for 3 courses. Would love to have you join us.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Joe, for having me. I enjoyed it.
Whether you go through that training or you take, just a lot of what you learned today, just that idea of slowing down, it's interesting. As she was talking about being hugged by a tree, there was this field that was behind my parents' house that now it's a subdivision, but there were these 2 trees that my parents had set this boundary of this one like pole, like a power pole, telephone pole. And we as little kids could go pretty much anywhere we wanted in the field, but we couldn't go past that pole. And so there was these two trees that were back there, and we would play in them. And as Jan was talking, it just was like such a place that I went to, of a place of calm, and of just like playing with my brother out in the field. And just what a special memory to remember. We couldn't do this show without our amazing sponsors. And today, Gusto is our sponsor. Gusto has payroll, HR solutions. They make health insurance, 401ks, onboarding, commuter benefits, all those things so much easier. And they are so worth the price. It's who we use here at Practice the Practice. Head on over to gusto.com/Joe. Again, that's gusto.com/Joe to get started, to get some help in that area. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.